Everybody, welcome to the Honolulu Multifamily and More collaboration with ADPI. We got Mike here. We're going to do introductions on that to him in a second. This is going to be our second virtual meetup in this context here, doing a Zoom call. So thanks everybody for coming out. Go down to the agenda. All right, things we're going to do. So we're going to do an icebreaker. I'm going to do a quick underwriting segment for the education series for those who are in the Honolulu multifamily and more. I've kind of been doing this education segment that building up, every month, adding a little bit each time. So now we're at kind of more of an underwriting overview chapter. We're going to go into our El Paso deal update, which is just an ongoing update of this deal, 48 unit we closed last month. We're going to break out into some networking. It's going to be pretty fun. Then with Mike and Matt and I, all military or prior military, we're going to do a military investing panel. It's kind of we have some preset questions. We also have an Ask Me Anything if anybody in the participants are active duty or prior, just anything on investing, using the benefits we have, start investing, more specifically real estate. That's what I do. All right, so the way we're gonna do this, because it's going to be impossible to get granular on education or on underwriting in like the 20 minutes we have allotted, and half y'all will be sleeping anyway if I did. So let's, I'm going to go brief, the 10,000 foot view. And then after everything, we get through like the slide deck and we do all the other things we have planned. Anybody wants to stay on and chat, I'll walk through a deal that we did on, real time, an actual deal that we underwrote, that we actually closed on the El Paso deal, which you'll hear about, and walk through that underwriting. I might actually pull it up here. On the side too. Actually, Duke, while I'm reading the slides, would you be able to pull it up just in case I want to reference it real quick?
Sure.
Just the one I have up is the takeover.
Yeah, we got it.
All right, cool. So underwriting basics. If you were on last month, you know that the where we left off was the things you need from an OM submitting from an LOI. So I'm going to recap a little bit of that and talk about what actual underwriting. So T12. We should all know what that is, right? It's a trailing 12-month profit loss statement. So it usually looks like a big Excel matrix, and it has each column is a month and has your income, expenses, NOI, and cash flows. So it will show you the trends of how that property is performing over the last 12 months. Okay. The next document you need is the rent roll. So the rent roll is product they're using property management software. If they're using some kind of Excel, it lists all the leases that a property has, who's in that unit, what their lease start date is, end date is, what their lease rent is, what their security deposit is. And usually, depending on how robust their system is, it'll tell if they're current or not, or their payment history on that rent roll. Mainly, we're just looking for the lease expiration dates and the lease rent amount. All right, next one is the OM, is the offering memorandum. This is the package you're going to get from a broker on a property. So learning a little bit of that multifamily jargon. So the OM is going to have the stuff on the deal is going to have the pro forma, which you're going to get from the broker. Take that, throw it in the trash. Then what you're looking for that I like OMs for is the market research in OMs is actually pretty good. Brokers usually put in some pretty good market research about that property, that neighborhood, that city. Some good data points from like the census or BLS.gov or city data on why that area is a good place to invest, like job growth, population growth, any new players coming in the market, like whatever, Google's building a new thing in this town, and they're building and they're going to bring in 4,000 jobs. So they'll have a good pulse on stuff like that. So that's what I like OMs for. And then you'll usually have it should have the T12 and rent roll somehow embedded in somewhere embedded in there. and then also the comps. So if there's comps for that property, they should pull that, throw it in the OM, and that way you can look to see what the comparable properties are getting for rents and things like that in that market. So that's the OM is. You're going to need that. And then market knowledge. Don't start underwriting deals until you've put in the time, until you put in the hours to make sure you know your market. All right, I'm going to foot stomp this pretty much the next like half hour is definitely know your market. You want to know what your median household income is for your market. You want to know the job growth, the year-over-year job growth. You want to know the population growth over the last 20 years. You want to know who the top 5 biggest employers are and what sectors they're in. All right, how stable the market is. You want to know what your market rents are for each class of property, both on a class level, on a room level, and on a square foot level. That way you can compare. And then when we go into the expenses, you're going to want to know your market. And I'm going to put on that later, but definitely do not skimp on your market research. You want to know as much as you possibly can. And last month, if you stayed on, I went a whole hour into after the meeting on different things you can do for your market research: city data, area vibes, BLS.gov, the census.gov, data, USA.io are just some of the sites that we go to collect that market information and build that thesis for that market of why we want to invest in there. But you're going to need to absolutely know that stuff. All right. Where we got here? Source a deal analyzer or build your own. So you can do this, the back of napkin math. If you want to just do something quick, definitely don't buy a property on that. You can build, if you're good at Excel, you can build your own spreadsheet. There's a million of them out there and they're all 80% the same. So you can go get a deal analyzer. A lot of people give them out for free. But you can go get a good Excel product, deal analyzer, which isn't the real issue. Is whose is better than what. The thing you need to know is the underlying formulas. That's again what a lot of people don't spend their time on. Is they think they got I got my deal analysis spreadsheet from this XYZ guru and they have 4,000 units or something, so it's the best there is. And they just plug numbers in mindlessly and, wait for a little box to turn green at the bottom of the spreadsheet and be like, oh, it turned green, I can invest. The spreadsheet says I'm good to go. That's the worst thing you could do. There's so many other variables that spreadsheet cannot compute, such as time, value, money, risk, opportunity cost. So things like that you as an investor need to ask yourself and make decisions on. And then also, if you don't know the underlying formulas, you're going to get the classic garbage in, garbage out with any software, especially with Excel. You can accidentally hit a space bar in a formula, and it can mess up the formula 3 tabs over, and you don't even know it. And then the whole data from then on is skewed, and you might not know it for weeks going into this due diligence before you find that mistake. So don't just rely on a spreadsheet that you get. Spend the time, go through it, and try to figure out what the formulas are and how they're tied together to get those KPIs, which we'll talk about here in a second. So spend the time, know your spreadsheets. And again, we'll go into, after this whole thing, if we have time, I'll bring up a spreadsheet and I'll show you. All right, so underwriting basics, so we'll get some basic terminology for underwriting. So we have income minus expenses equals NOI, your net operating income. So net operating income is your income that you have to pay your debt with. It's the income that you have to pay your mortgage, essentially. And then you take your NOI, take out your CapEx reserves, take out your debt service, which is your mortgage payment, and that's what your cash flow is. That's what you're left with, okay? And then to evaluate property value in the multifamily space, since we're dealing with commercial property versus residential, we determine property value based off of NOI divided by the capitalization rate. equals your property value. Okay, which is different than residential property, your duplexes, fourplexes, stuff like that, which go off of comp value. Right? If you buy a fourplex for $100,000, it's going to be worth the same amount as the fourplex that sold last week for 100, grand. So comp value approach versus income value approach. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I prefer multifamily over anything else. All right, next slide. Oh, if you have any questions, I talk really fast, especially because I'm slamming, bangs here. So put a question in the chat box. I think Steve or somebody, Matt, may be monitoring.
Yeah, we're keeping an eye on it.
Me and tell me to slow down or if I need to elaborate on something. All right, so your income. All right, so your income has a couple different components to it. You have your gross potential rent. So your gross potential rent is if you had all units in that property rented to 100% occupancy at market rents. So this is, again, know your market, because the OM might say something, but you need to know your market. You need to go out and research to see if that gross potential rent is accurate. Sometimes it's inflated. Sometimes they might be undercutting the market, but that's you being able to spot that, because that'll be a value add opportunity. That'll be your competitive advantage over another investor. If you know that, hey, they're saying, their rents are 700, but I know in this market, because I'm an expert at this market, that rents can actually be 750. So that's something you hold close to your chest. Yes.
Speaking on markets, Lax is asking, where does the cap rate originate from? Is that from the market average?
Ooh, I got a whole slide on it. But yes,
Okay.
capitalization rate is your return if you don't use any kind of debt. So if you go into a 6 cap building, your return, if you paid 100% cash, would be 6%. All right. Obviously, if you have levered returns, it's going to be much higher. Again, why multifamily is better. Where it originates from is a risk analysis versus potential growth equation. And I'll go over that on the next slide. So pretty much that's what everybody agrees to pay for that class of property at this moment in time, right? Your A-class properties might be at a 4.5 cap. That's the acceptable rate of return that people are willing to pay for that class of property, and it'll go up from there. B might be 5.5, 6. A C might be 6.5, 7.5, somewhere around there. D might be 9, 10, or something like that. So it's the acceptable return for the risk that people are willing to take is your if they're pay 100% cash. So it's an apples to apples, because debt will skew the data, and that's why we worry about cap rate and NOI, because it takes debt out of the equation, and I'll explain that later as well. Did that answer your question? Maybe. All right. So gross potential rent is your rent if every unit was rented at 100 at your market rent. So you need to go out to things like apartments.com, research rents in that market to figure out what the market rate is. Use tools like rentometer.com and type in that address to figure out what the average rent is in that place. You can use, if you want something more higher level for like MSA level data, you can go to the city-data.com, look for average contractor rent for that market, right? So that is the gross potential rent. Compare that to what you know, because you're a market expert and you did your homework, and what the OM is saying, right? The next one is loss to lease. Loss to lease is going to be the difference between the average rents on the rent roll and what the rent premium is for the markets. So if they're saying, if your homework says the rents are $700 a month for that 2-bedroom, and their rent is saying they're getting $600 a month average for their 2-bedroom, the loss lease is $100. Okay. So you start with the highest income. Gross potential is the most income that this property could possibly produce right now in this market. And then you start backing out. So I back out loss lease, because they're not going to have every single unit rented at market rent. It's just not going to happen. So you need to factor in that based off the rent roll. Then you go down to economic vacancy. We know that just because they have 100 units, and even if 100 units are filled, doesn't mean that 100 units are paying, right? You could have a physical vacancy of maybe they have 10 units empty and they're at a 90% occupancy. but even if they had 90 people in there, there's a good chance that not every one of those 90 people are paying their rent. So you back out even further to figure out what their economic vacancy is. And you get the economic vacancy number from looking at the vacancies on the rent roll and the T12. So the T12, you'll be able to see the difference between the rent roll, which their total scheduled rent is on the rent roll, that's the bottom number, and then the top line of the T12, which is actual rent received. And that delta between those two is your economic vacancy. An example meaning if they had a 10-unit property at $1,000 rents, their gross scheduled rent would be, what is that, $10,000 a month. But if you look at their T12 and the top line income is showing $9,000 income received, right? Then they're missing $1,000 in economic vacancy. So they have a 10% economic loss, and that's where you would put it in. You'd put $10,000. Okay. And then you go in and add additional income. Additional income could be things like if they're doing a RUB, a ratio utility billing, the bill back for water. If they're doing things like most common that you'll see is laundry income. If they have coin-op laundry on the facility, on the property, that's most often their additional income that they have, especially with mom and pop buyers. They're not going to have the higher level RUBs or contract utility services like that. But normally you'd put your additional income there, laundry, income most often. Factor all this down, and now we get to that line, effective gross income. All right. So that's what they're actually pulling in every month, right? Not what the rent roll says, not what the OM says. The effective, the EGI is what they're actually getting. Okay. And that's the number we're going to use. All right. Next slide. Oh man, I'm already at 20 minutes and I'm not even the third way through these. I got to talk faster. All right. Expenses. You must know your market. All right. We talked about this already a bunch of times. I'm going to keep doing it again. You need to know your expenses. The best way to know your expenses is to talk to people, talk to operators in that market. Especially if you're going out of state, you want to find investors that are investing in the class of property and the asset type that you are looking to buy. You don't want to ask a wholesaler what expenses are on a 20-unit apartment complex, right? They just don't know. You need to talk to people that are actually operating in that market. And there's many sources, if you're part of a coaching group, that's an awesome pool of people. Bigger Pockets is usually where I start when I'm just looking into a new market, just because they're the biggest group. Local meetups like this, Multifamily More, we have 18 chapters now. So there's a good chance one of these will be by with wherever market you're going into. And then property managers, Zach, he's on, when we were looking at our properties in El Paso, we spent many calls, many hours just going through our budgets and kind of factoring in, okay, how much is this going to cost? How much is water bills? How much is trash? How much is unit turns? How much is other contract services? How much is his cost? What are his fees? And then you start backing into what a expense per door is what you're going to try to fix. So that next line there. So the expense per door is what you need to figure out for your market. It's going to be different for every single market and every single asset class type. So you can't use an example, 3,500 is what you found for maybe a C-class property. That won't apply to the same property in El Paso as it would be in, Indy or something like that. So you have to be very local on this expense per door. But what you're doing is it's called normalizing your expenses. And the importance of this is when you're looking at pro formas that are in the OM, there's a 99% chance that the expenses that they're going to give you are less than the actuals. And that means that they're going to make it sound like this property they're going to frame it in a way that this property is cheaper to operate than what it's actually going to cost you. So for example, you did your homework and you knew your market and you talked to brokers or you talked to property managers, talked to other investors, and they said, C-class property in this market, $3,500 a door. And then you look at their OM and it's saying $2,700 a door per year. that's BS. And then you can go to them and be like, hey, this is, you might be able to get this, for whatever reason, but I know I can't. So I can't underwrite using $2,700 a door. I have to underwrite with 35. And you have to be able to tell them that, because if you use their number, then you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot later when you actually start operating and realizing that you can't operate it for $2,700 a door. So you need to know what the normalized expense is in that market. Again, it's very, very hyper local. It's not going to translate into other markets or other classes of property. All right. And then once you get that, what's the next slide look like? Okay, go back one. Thank you. All right. So once you get your expense per door, what we do, and the way Duke and I underwrite when we were first evaluating a property, like the first hour that we're sitting down looking at a lead, we use their expenses, that EGI that we backed our way into from the last slide, the income, and then we use our expenses. I don't look at the seller's expenses really at all at this step, because I'm not going to be able to operate on their expenses. If they have payroll, or if they don't have payroll because they self-manage, well, I need to pay a manager. I need to pay Zach, who is our property manager and just happens to be on this call, probably to make sure I don't talk crap about him. Just joking, Zach. Love you. I'm just seeing if anybody's paying attention. But anyway, yeah, so you need to have your income, your EGI, and then your expense per door. You need to know what you operate that property as, and then you figure out what's called the OPEX ratio. And that's where you kind of do a litmus test on your underwriting. Should be around 50%, right? Take note of that OPEX ratio, because then you can go back and start putting in the start of your value add opportunities and negotiating. So if you know their expense per door is, say, if it says 2,800, that's going to be a negotiating point for you. However, if you know your expense per unit is $3,500 a door and their OM says $4,200 a door, now you have a value add. Now you know the second you take over that property, you can increase the NOI $700 a door per unit. And if you multiply that by maybe a 20 unit, 30 unit, 40 unit, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars of value that you create in it almost instantaneously. And that's what we do. That's the name of this game, which is the next slide. NOI. Hey, this is the name of the game. I feel like I just said that. Yeah, so the NOI is the name of the game in multifamily. It's increasing the NOI. That's why you exist, is to increase the NOIs, to increase expenses, increase income, decrease expenses, which increases the NOI, because the NOI is part of that equation. NOI divided by cap rate equals property value. So the higher the NOI and the lower the cap rate, the higher that property is worth. Okay, so divide the NOI by prevailing capitalization rate to determine your property value. If you're feeling froggy, you can compute your own cap rate. Now back to whoever asked that question earlier, I don't have the chat box up, so who said it?
Lax.
Max?
Lax.
All right, Lax. So if you're feeling froggy, there is the official, right? The financial equation for capitalization rate is R minus G. R is risk. So risk is two components, and your eyes are going to glaze over on this, but like somebody just left. They're like, screw this. Your R is two components. It's your risk of that property in a zero risk investment, and then the risk factor that you're applying for this property. And the zero risk is going to be the T-bill, right? That's what we compare it against, the 10-year treasury bond, because that's a zero risk investment. Government's going to print money to pay you. So that's going to be one component of it. And then you add to that number, what's the risk profile of this property? Is it and you assign a number to that. So it could be, maybe it's a 7, the 7 risk profile. That's the return I need to get because of the property's older. It's 40 years old. It's 30% vacant. It's going to require heavy renovations. So it's a C-class property in a C-class neighborhood. So maybe I'll put a 7 on it. Maybe I'll put an 8 on it. It's the return that you're going to want to get for that risk profile that you're assigning to that. And that's extremely subjective based off of your experience, what you're good at, your capabilities to be a project manager and reposition an asset. So it's going to be very different for 2 different investors. Okay. And the G is going to be the NOI growth that you calculate. So if you calculate that the NOI is going to grow 2 to 3% a year, that's what you're going to put there. And 2 to 3% a year is usually what we do. So it's going to be, say, a risk profile of, what do we say, 7? So 7, and then minus G, which is your NOI growth factor, is 2. So 7 minus 2 is 5. Your cap rate is going to be a 5 for this property. So the hard part about this is that people, what the cap rate should be, but that doesn't mean that anybody else gives a shit. Like they're going to pay your other competitors, that you're competing against for this deal, they're going to pay whatever the prevailing cap rate is. So because you know this equation and you know what the property on paper financially is worth, doesn't mean that you're going to be able to go to them and bid that. You're probably going to get outbid a lot. So you have to take that into consideration, because you're going to have a lot of people that are just going to take the prevailing cap rate and make an offer off that. Okay. But this goes into your risk analysis that you need to do on the deal. Okay. So you need to know that if you're going to pay a lower cap rate than this property deserves, that you're taking on that risk, and you need to make sure that you have the capability to handle that type of project, knowing that you're knowingly taking on more risk. The problem is people don't realize they're taking on extra risk. Okay. Next slide. All right. Financing. How are you financing? So are you going to do seller financing? Are you going to do community bank, agency financing? So all different types of financing, but you need to have a financing quotes that you can underwrite with. So an example from a local lender would be 4.5% APR, 2 years of IO, which is interest only, 25-year amortization period, 10-year term with a 2% yield maintenance. Right. So that'd be an example of, you call the local lender, say, hey, I'm looking at commercial loans. What are you offering on a B-class stabilized 20 unit with 20% down, 25% down? They would throw out something like this. And this is what you're going to use to put into your financial models to figure out what your debt service is for that property. And when you go into the end of your underwriting, so you take the NOI and you back out the debt service, which this will tell you what your debt service is going to be. And you're looking for a DSCR, debt service coverage ratio, of 1.25 or greater. If the deal doesn't underwrite on actuals, so their income and your expenses with their financing terms that they just gave you, it doesn't underwrite higher than a 1.25, you are not going to get a loan. So that's a showstopper right there. Don't even bother wasting your time unless you can negotiate or find value. Go back through your underwrite, find value add that you can add there, something that you missed, go back and renegotiate, because the bank is going to need a 1.25 at closing in order to write the loan. Right? They don't really, at this point, they don't care what your grand plan is for this property. They want to make sure you can pay the mortgage next month. Right? So you might say, you might tell them in your pitch deck that, hey, I'm going to raise rents $300. They're at 60% occupied. I'm going to bring it up to 90% occupied, and all this great stuff. They're not going to care at this point. They're going to want to make sure that you can pay the mortgage next month. So if it doesn't underwrite 1.25 or higher, you're stopping there, and you're going to go back, check your numbers, and use this as a negotiating point for the seller. Because and this will give you the most leverage when you're negotiating, because it's not a me, it's a them, right? I'm not trying to get a better deal. The bank's not going to give me a loan. And not only are they not going to give me a loan, they're not going to give any investor that comes and looks at this property a loan. So you should probably work with me. right? That's how you're going to frame that. Because it's not, hey, it's not a me problem, it's the deal problem. And you can skip on me and the next investor is going to run into the same problem and you just wasted a month. All right. So stop at this point. If it's not 1.25, go back and talk to the broker or the seller, and you need to get this higher or you're not going to get a loan. If they're unwilling to budge, or maybe they can't because they have too much debt, that's when you start talking, getting creative, maybe getting seller financing or something like that. If you're more sophisticated, I would say, and more experienced, I would say go get like bridge debt, which is pretty much a hard money loan. But it's going to add a whole lot of risk to the project because you're going to have a higher interest rate, a lot of holding costs, and you're really going to have to be confident in your ability to perform that reposition in order to get it to a stabilized position to refinance it into long-term debt. So if you're not there, then I would just stop at this point and go back and try to renegotiate them down to get this number above 1.25. All right, what else we got? Oh, there's more. Okay. Renovation. So renovation, once you get into it, and this is where having boots on the ground helps, especially for most of us are going to be out-of-state investors. You need to have boots on the ground. We use our property managers. We use the people we meet on meetup groups like this or like Bigger Pockets and say, hey, can you go, walk this property? Either if it's a friend or something like that, just pay them like, hey, I'll give you $100 to go kind of walk this property, tell me everything that's wrong. If they're experienced in this type of asset. Or again, you don't want to get a wholesaler or flipper to give you a capital expenditure budget for a apartment complex. You can use contractors. I had the best experience with property managers and colleagues in the area that own similar type property. You have two types of CapEx. You're going to have your mandatory stuff that's not revenue generating. So your roofs, your safety items, if you have like railings that are out of code or any kind of code violations, and you're going to need to have those CapEx budget for those. Any kind of just system things like furnaces, water heaters, all those roofs, windows, all those things just go bad. You need to have a budget for those. What sucks about those is that they're not revenue generating. You can replace them. They're not going to make the property worth really anymore. You're not going to be, a tenant's not going to pay higher rent because it has a new roof on the building. So you have to really make sure you account for those because you're really not going to get your money back for them, but you need to do it. And a lot of hardline negotiating tip for this is I usually put the onus on insurance companies. Just like I did with the DSCR, like, hey, the bank's not going to give me a loan if the DSCR is above 1.25. I do the same thing for mandatory CapEx. I'd be like, look, the insurance company is going to come, they're going to do an inspection, and they're not going to write a policy on this because the railings are out of code or because the roof is, deteriorating. And it's not just me, anybody's going to have this issue. So I need a seller credit for that or a price reduction. And then we go into revenue generating. So revenue generating, again, is the huge asset on this is going to be your property manager because they're going to be the ones that are doing the majority of your interior renovations. And what you need to do is calculate a per door price for your renovations to bring your units up to market rents. Because remember, before we had a loss to lease. So now you need to close that loss to lease, whatever it is. And the way you do that is usually through renovating the insides. You need to figure out why are these properties running for 1,000 and mine's only running for 900? Is it just bad marketing? Or am I not offering what the market wants? Maybe nicer fixtures, paint, things like that inside, nicer appliance packages, whatever it is. You got to figure that out and figure out what, and this again, where your property manager can come into play, figure out, okay, well, hey, if you do this, this, and this, I'm confident we can get $1,000. Then you calculate a per door price. Me and Zach, again, spending hours on our make ready, our turn for different levels of finishes to get that rent premium is what the name is called. So what our rent premium is going to be to make sure we can get that premium. All right. And then you budget that in. So if you have 10 units, $2,000, you want to budget 20 grand for interior revenue generating. This is going way too long. Okay. I didn't plan this out. All right. Build your pro forma. So you build your pro forma. You take, like before I said, you take the brokers, crumple it up, throw it in the trash. But you need a pro forma. You need your pro forma. So this is where you take your year one, so your T0, which is at acquisition time now, financials, and you start building what this property is going to look like per year. And most of these Excel spreadsheets will have some kind of thing to compute this for you. And you'll go in and you'll say, maybe at year one, at acquisition, I have a 30% vacancy because it's a distressed property. Maybe at the end of year one, I might have a 20% vacancy. At the end of year two, I might have a 10% vacancy. At the end of year three, I might have a 5% vacancy or something like that. This is where you go in and start implementing your reposition plan. Filling vacancies, bringing rents up to market, things like that, decreasing expenses. None of this stuff is going to happen overnight, which I'll talk about in a minute. A lot of this stuff, it's going to take time. So you want to build it in to your pro forma to make sure that you're accounting for a project level plan here. All right. So what are the value add opportunities at this point? This is where you're going to start questioning the existing property and try to figure out, okay, why are they selling and what are the value add? Like what's that meat on the bone everybody likes to say for me? Is it increasing rents? Is it reducing expenses? Can I get better financing terms because they financed this property in 2000 and, six, and interest rates are at 7%. And now I can get a loan at, 3.5% on a 25-year amortization schedule with no yield maintenance. So that'll be a big factor. So what are the value add components for you? Build that into your pro forma. Okay. All right. Oh, there's more. Anybody still awake? Somebody's sleeping, I guarantee you.
You've got this. You've got this. Right. Keep doing it.
All right. So now you're going to start assessing your KPIs, your key performance indicators. After you build your pro forma, your spreadsheet, and if you don't have the spreadsheet in there or the formulas in there, this is where you'll put them in. Again, most of the off-the-shelf spreadsheets you can get will have these in there. So the KPIs will tell you how this deal is going to perform for you and your expected returns based off of your 5-year pro forma, which you just agonizingly built. First one, cash on cash ROI. That's going to be the return on investment of the cash that you have normally at year one or at time now. So at acquisition, under current financials, under current operations, what's your cash on cash ROI? You need to find that for yourself. And you do that by what your acceptable level of risk is, what comparable properties get, things like that for that class. A normal cash on cash ROI at acquisition, C-class property, I don't know, maybe like 10% is usually where people start. And then based off of different market factors, where we're at in the market cycle, stuff like that, they'll either go up a point or two or down a point or two for a C-class property. But usually like 10% is what you can expect, or what you can start at, I guess, is a better way to say that for your cash on cash ROI. The next one is your annualized returns. So this is, if you were to add up all your cash on cash ROIs for each year, just the cash portion of your return on investments and average them, that'll be your annualized return number. Because value add investors, especially on apartments, we're not just going to have a linear cash on cash ROI. It's not going to be, start out at 10% and stay at 10%. It's most likely going to be at something like 6% at acquisition, then maybe 7% year 2, 10% year, 3, 4, and 5, and then you sell the place. So it's an average of how much your cash flows are going to be worth, all right, excluding sale. Okay, so what is your cash flows? How hard is your money working for you over that 5 years is the annualized return. EM is your equity multiple. That is, if you put in $100 grand on a deal, and you get back at sale 200 grand, you're going to have a 2x equity multiple. So, how many times are you multiplying your money on that investment over that time period? A normal one for multifamily, our baseline metric is a 2x. So we're looking to double our money every deal we do. Okay. And the last one is IRR, your internal rate of return. This is similar to the annualized returns, except that it includes the capital outlaid at the front end and the sale at the back end. So it calculates the entire line of cash flows over that project level. So if you put out $100,000 to buy the property and you have, $5,000 of cash flows each year for the 5 years, and then you sell the property for $200,000, it's going to calculate, start negative 100,000 and then add all the other ones up, and it'll tell you, divide it, and it'll tell you what your rate of return is for the entire project. A lot of people, and there should be an asterisk next to that, because the more I learn about IRR, the more I learn about its limitations that people aren't aware of. So people think IRR is like the pinnacle of metrics to evaluate a property's performance, but there's severe limitations on IRR. For example, it doesn't take into account the risk profile of the property or the time value of money. Right? It's just an algebraic equation, just like the 4 above it, or the 3 above it. So you need to take into account all 4 of these on what they're telling you about the deal. Okay. For example, IRR. I'll show you a perfect example of this limitation would be, you could have a deal where you get multifamily property. Say you have a 20 unit or 100 unit property that's cash flowing $20,000 a year. So each year you got $20,000 cash flow, $20,000 cash flow, $20,000 cash flow for 5 years. That's $100,000 of cash flow. And then you sell the property and you get, $100,000 proceeds from the sale, and a 2x multiple, and your IRR is going to be like, off the charts into like into the 20% IRR. You're like, that's awesome. Okay. You can have the same exact deal and have it to where it's 0 cash flow every year, and your equity at sale is like, what would be $300,000. What's the IRR going to be? It's going to be exactly the same. But those 2 deals have 2 completely risk profiles. One, you're getting $20,000 of cash every year. The other one, you're getting no cash for 5 years, and you're hoping for a big sale at the end of 5 years. So you can see that IRR has a limitation. It doesn't take account the time value money or the risk that you're placing on that number or on that deal. So take it for what it's worth. It's an algebraic expression to be used with all the other ones to give you a full picture of the risk profile of this deal. Okay. Am I done? No more? There's more. Okay. Now your time. So you got your deal, plugged it in, you hit all your KPIs. You got your 8% annualized return, 10% cash on cash, 2x multiple, and a 17% IRR. That's a home run deal. You're awesome. Now it's time to take your investor hat off and put on your devil's advocate hat. And you need to look at that deal from every angle and tear it apart and figure out what are all the things that can go wrong. Because I'm not, the best. I'm not a Warren Buffett. I'm not the best investor that has ever lived. So why do I think that I have what it takes to pull this deal off? If they can't get $1,000 rents, what makes me think I can get $1,000 rents, right? So you got to take that off. Okay. Well, if they're at 60% occupancy, what makes me think I can drop, 40% vacancy rate if they couldn't do it? Take that off. All right. If my underwriting says I can, reposition this property in 2 years, and fucking pandemic takes out half the world, right? And all of a sudden, now what? Now you got to postpone your project for 2 years. Does the deal still have legs? So you need to sit there and just poke holes through this project and figure out all the things that you think you can do, all those value add things that you think you can do. And you need to ask yourself, well, what if I can't do that? All right. What if the deal gets worse? Right? What if I buy it at a 7 cap and I exit at a 9 cap? All right. And I just, $200,000-$300,000 is vaporized. All right. Will the deal still have legs? So this is part of your stress test. This is what separates beginner investors from shrewd investors. That understand the number one rule of investing is don't lose your money, right? Don't lose capital preservation. Rule number one. A lot of people don't consider this and go through and figure out all the ways that they're going to lose their money. And that's what you need to be doing here. And especially if you're going to be taking on partners or anything like that, where you're going to be vested other people's money and you're going to take on that fiduciary responsibility, you need to really make sure and ask yourself, throw your ego away, because I'm like, I'm not that cool. I'm not special. What makes you think I can do this plan? And you need to really sit down. Everything that can possibly go wrong in this deal, that you're going to lose all your money and all your investors' money. And you need to have an answer for it. And you need to figure out a mitigation process to figure out, well, if this happens, here's the 10 things I can do to make up for it. And if the deal still has legs after that, write an LOI. You can start getting excited. You have a deal that might be worth pursuing. Full disclosure, probably 1 out of, 10 deals get to this point. They usually fall apart very quickly once you start poking holes through your own numbers. Okay. Is that it? Any questions? Oh my God, there's more. All right, sorry, I'll try to wrap this up. Beware of these common mistakes. These are ones just off the top of my head that I see most people do wrong. And believe me, I've done every one of these wrong, and I'm probably doing some of these wrong right now. Just joking. First one I did was over renovate interiors. I did this on a 4-unit where I walked in, I read some books and I was like, oh man, if I just do all this awesome stuff, I can charge whatever I want for rent. Because I didn't know my market. And I thought, well, some places in this town are getting $1,000 rents. So if I do all this nice shit to my apartment, I can get $1,000 rents. And I didn't get down granular to my specific neighborhood. Just because they're getting it on that side of town doesn't mean that the residents in this community are going to pay that on this side of town. So you need to know to almost like your street level of what the market rate is and what the residents in that market are willing to pay for, because they might not give a crap about stainless steel appliances or granite countertops or nice fixtures, because their budget's only $600 regardless of how nice the unit is. So don't over renovate your interiors. Really, really know what the market's willing to pay for and bring your units to that level and just that level. It's not a you build it, they will come type scenario, or you build it, they will pay. You'll end up broke. Next one is under budget CapEx. This is one that project managers fight with. Doesn't matter how experienced they are. The cost overruns is like the number one thing that I see people going bankrupt over, is making sure you get multiple bids, making sure you analyze the scope of work on those bids, and try to renegotiate. Ask questions of your vendors, ask questions of your contractors, and really try to understand those CapEx budgets and make sure that you add a buffer to that too. So if they say $100,000, budget 120, because it's inevitable. And anybody here that's ever ran a project knows that once you set a budget and a timeline, literally every minute after that, the world's working against you to go over budget and over time. It's just how it works. So you need to be on top of your project management and really, really hone in on your CapEx budget. All right, project timelines are too short. A lot of people think they can buy a property in, what month are we in? May, and by June they're gonna fill 20 units. They're gonna renovate 20 units, fill them at market rents, and they're gonna be driving Ferraris by the end of the year because they increased the NOI so much they refinanced it and cashed out $2 million. This stuff takes time. I do project management on quarters. So I have like a phase 1 that corresponds with a quarter. So phase 1, 2, 3 of a reposition, and they go out from 12 to 18 months. That's my timeline to do, the bulk of my projects, the bulk of my interior, exterior renovations, rebranding, things like that. I shoot on an 18-month to 24-month timeline. So a lot of people, they budget too soon. They think they can go in there, put some ads on Facebook and fill 20 units overnight. And the worst part is that they will do their 5-year pro forma on that timeline. So they will go, year time now, 70%, and then, year one, 90% occupied. Like, it's not going to happen like that. It might happen. You may be found a diamond in the rough. Do not underwrite on that scale. If it's at 70% at acquisition, year one, put at 80% occupancy. At year two, 85, 90%. At year three, maybe 95%. Don't think you can go in and in 2-3 months have this place, completely flipped. It's not going to work. Timeline, you have leases to worry about, you have contractors, you have delays, any number of countless delays, global pandemics. And if you're underwriting on where this is going to bite you in the ass is that you underwrite on, you need to do this in order for the project to work. Like, I need to hit 90% occupancy and a CapEx budget of $100,000, or I'm losing, $40,000 of investor money this year alone. That's what's going to happen. All right. Is that you put yourself in a position where you need the entire property's viability is hinging on your ability to work on this budget in this short timeline. All right. And that goes right into the next one, not enough reserves. And then the next one is overestimating the ability to raise income. So, you see rents at $700, and then you go do, too high level of market research, and you see rents at $1,000. You automatically, without even considering or questioning it, why they're at 700, that you think you can get 1,000. And then really you get into that market and you're like, oh shit, this property is right next to a train track, and they have a 4 o'clock freight train, and an 8 o'clock freight train, and a midnight freight train, and 3 a.m. freight train. So nobody wants to live there. And that's why you'll never be able to get $1,000 rents, because of the location. Real estate's hyper local. You need to be hyper local on your market analysis and really understand, not at the MSA level, but at the granular level, what you can get for your rents. Okay. Oh my God, I'm done. Cheers. Am I doing this too?
Do you want to?
No, it's Matt. Matt's up.
Oh my God. Is anybody awake? Do we need to take a break?
Yeah,
Matt's
so
up.
yeah, Vince, you had about 20 minutes for that. So I think by my math, I've got 14 seconds.
I know. What was that? I overshot by 20 minutes. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, like 40 minutes.
Did a good job though, man. It was great. Hopefully
I added value. Okay. So you're up.
Yeah,
Matt?
guys. Yeah. So some of this will be redundant if you're actually investing with us. It's a little bit similar to the webinar that we recently did, but we closed on La Puerta del Sol April 15th, tax day, or what was tax day. It ended up not being, but we're pretty excited about that. Quick fun fact about
El Paso.
what slide on? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. My slides were changing. Quick fun fact about El Paso. I personally enjoy this one because I'm a boot guy. Family's all in Texas. I like cowboy boots. El Paso is the boot making capital. Exactly. The boot making capital of the world. So Justin Boots is real big there. Tony Lama. And then there's a company called Rocket Buster Boots. And if you fly into El Paso and you get off the plane, as you get into the lobby, there's a bunch of glass cases full of custom boots. Rocket Buster Boots will literally make any kind of boot that you can think of, like crazy stuff. I've been daydreaming all day today about like the next pair of boots that I'm going to order when Vince and I fly out there to see the property, so that they're ready for me a couple weeks after.
Yeah. What were you saying? I think you said you wanted baby seal and endangered elephant boots. Was that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's it.
You jerk?
Yeah. With human flesh uppers.
Yeah.
No. Just a standard boot, but I think I'll maybe get the Tri-City logo, the Multifamily and More logo, La Puerta del Sol. And the goal is by the time that we, hopefully shortly, I'll get the rest of these guys wearing some cowboy boots too.
We'll see.
All right. So I'm going to talk about leasing. So a couple of the things that we've been doing that's a little bit different than most operators is Rently, which is a self-showing lockbox. So it allows prospective tenants to see the units. Facebook lead ads, Facebook boosted posts, and Facebook groups, and Facebook Messenger bots. So these are all things within Facebook, but typically not applied to the Class C apartment level. We've been finding a lot of success with that, especially in these COVID times when Facebook ads are actually a lot cheaper than they normally are. And then the standard Craigslist listings, apartments.com. We actually went with the gold package on apartments.com in order to get the bigger ad size. And along with that comes 3D tour, Matterport 3D tour, and professional photography. And then we're looking into AHRN as well, and Fort Bliss housing. So because we're close to Fort Bliss in the northeast of El Paso, that's actually one of the demographics that we're targeting. So one of our niches is the military housing. So we're offering military residents $100 off for referrals to other Army at Fort Bliss. So that's another strategy that we're using to get some more organic traffic through. All right. So next, I think it's bids.
Yes. Our occupancy here. So we're at 80%, 20% vacant. That equals 10 units on this property. We took it over at 12 vacant units. Our kick-ass property manager had flipped 2 of those units within 4 days after acquisition. So we had 12 units vacant. He had 2 of them flipped on the market and rented out within a week after acquisition. And we had 2 people skip town in the middle of the night, I think like 2 days ago or yesterday. I don't remember. The days are blending together now. But so that's why we went back up to 10 vacant units. And we're flipping at he's flipping at a rate of about 2 per week, doing our level 2 and level 3 make readies. And what that means is just the level of finish we're putting on that property. And again, this goes back into the importance of budgeting. We're going back more than he probably ever wants to go into how much detail we put into understanding how much it costs to do one flip on a unit. I think we're at around maybe $2,500, somewhere around there. So each time we go in and take a unit from, a legacy unit from when we took over and turn it into a level 2 modification or remodel to get that rent premium, we're really paying attention to that budget and really honing in on that. But it's been awesome. About two units per week, and leasing. He's leasing them up, before they even hit the market there. So it's been pretty epic. CapEx. So we're gotten finalizing bids. We're redoing all the staircases. We're putting in a big old monument sign out in the front road. Well lit. I think it's a 6 by 8 foot sign by one of the best people in the town. It's going to be awesome. Really, really drive some good traffic. Really let the neighborhood know that this property is, under new management, and it's going to be completely new. Okay. We're having the parking lot resealed. Zach just installed new lighting. It's one of those things, shady lighting or really dim lighting on exterior buildings really drives away a lot of people. And in perfect case in point was one of the first people that Zach placed was a young female. Oh, wow. Was this the pictures he just sent? Like tonight?
Yep. These are the updated ones.
You guys are the best. This happened like an hour ago. Yeah. So imagine those lights being like those super like dim amber, like you're going to get, stabbed under, in the shady areas, in the back. See the ones in the back? So that's the apartment across the street. So they used to be like that, like really dim area. So having the place lit up really puts people at, at a level of comfort, level of safety. Like we had back to my point, was a young female moved in, and her mom actually drove by that night and was like, I don't know about that place. It's kind of looks, dim and shady at night with the old lighting. So one of the first things we do is put these big, awesome LED lights in. One, they're more efficient because they're LED, and 2, they light this place up that lets everyone know, the level of safety, and not just for like theft or anything like that, but also like safety as far as like tripping hazards and stuff like that. that you might be able to run into, that everybody's heard the horror stories of, a tenant tripping on a curb and suing everybody for millions of dollars. This can help mitigate that. What's this? Sidewalk or parking lot. Yeah, we're gonna have the parking lot resealed and restriped. If you don't know what that is, you ever go to a place where it has like that nice, super black, shiny blacktop with nice, brand new striped, painted lines and everything, and curbing, and how good and fresh that looks. That's what we're doing. It has a really good ROI in terms of rebranding a property. $10,000, and it's going to make this place look, really, really good. Again, back into the community, let the community know, hey, we're here. We're going to make this place better than it was before. Okay. Here's our project timeline. So this is what Matt does. He manages the project timeline. So we put everything in, it's called a Gantt chart. So you can really get a visualize of all of our phase one projects. Remember, I told you I work in quarters on reposition. So all of our phase one projects are going to be all the things we have to do, safety related, and all the things that we're going to do based off on the rebranding. So we get all the vacant units, obviously renovate those, and get those on market top line. Then we go down to a lot of the exterior stuff. And point on that is a lot of people don't understand why you spend so much time and energy so early on in the project to renovate the exterior of a building, because they're revenue generating activities, right? Like a monument sign, a $14,000 monument or $10,000 monument sign is not going to increase the rents $1. So why would I do that? Why would I put such a priority on signs and landscaping? Because what I'm doing is we're rebranding the property, and we're trying to attract a better tenant profile, a better resident. And you're only going to do that if the property looks better, it's more inviting. That first impression is, man, this place looks great. You can't just renovate interior units and make the unit, nice gray paint schemes, two-tone paint, nice appliances, nice fixtures. But then when they're driving on the unit, they're driving on the property, the place looks like a dump from the outside. And you're like, wait till you get inside the unit. They don't care. The first impression's already been made. So be cognizant of what that first impression is of your prospective tenants as they come on the lot. Don't go in and, you need to pay attention to your interior units, but that exterior is way more important than you think it is. So you need to, Matt Callahan said I stole his thunder on CapEx. Am I talking when I shouldn't be?
That's okay. You're doing so good at it.
My bad. So I'll hand this back over to Matt.
So just to touch back on some of the stuff that Vince said, if you look at this Gantt chart, everything ends right around the first week of July, and that's kind of by design. So the monument sign right now is slated to end, like last project done July 3rd. Hopefully, if everything goes well, right now I know a bunch of you are probably tracking the Department of Defense travel ban, June 30th. Vince and I are planning to be out there for July 4th weekend. We're going to throw a big block party, the official, new ownership, try to get the mayor out there for a ribbon cutting. That's going to tie back into the monument sign, the new landscape, all that stone out there that's faded is getting replaced. It's getting torn up, new red stone, new parking lot, new stairs, new paint. Hopefully, like I said, get the mayor out there, do a ribbon cutting, have some food trucks, do a couple raffles, maybe some TVs. Even now, as I get bids, we're having to correct contractors, because they keep calling it Pinata Apartments, and we're trying to move away from that, just because the experience with that has probably not been great for people in the past. So we're trying to let them know, La Puerta del Sol is the beginning. We're here, and this is kind of the expectation that they can get under the new management, which kind of rolls us into the next slide. We already touched on that. The rebranding. This is the new logo that I'm going to put on, those cowboy boots that I'm going to get Vince and Duke and Steve wearing. But so that kind of ties back in again with all the stuff that we're doing on the exterior, is to just let people know, hey, there's something very different about this apartment complex, and that's what we want.
So just so you know, this was an absolutely amazing brief, guys. Definitely got a lot of awesome information here. Picking some stuff up myself too. So well done, guys. Well done. And I'm excited to hear the stuff that you guys are doing on your project. It looks epic, man. Got some
Yeah,
good
so
ideas.
we're doing like an ongoing kind of, from start to finish. This is all the good, bad, and the ugly.
100%.
Right.
Wow.
Steve, were you able to find them?
No, shoot.
Okay. It's in
Asana.
Multifamily More, Asana 512 agenda. Scroll down about halfway. If not, I can get it started while you're looking.
Yeah,
All right,
go ahead.
Mike, I'll start asking the first questions. And then if anybody wants to chime in, just, I don't know if we have a hand raise or whatever, raise your hand and then start asking
Tag
questions.
in. Yeah.
I've got a question.
Oh, okay. What's up?
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. So I was curious, how do you source your deals? Do you have a bird finder, like walking around and, sending out mailers and knocking on doors and asking owners if they want to sell?
Mike, what do you guys do?
Yeah, man. So great question. Finding deals can definitely be a very creative sport because there are a lot of different ways that you can do it. Facebook, social media, right, can be really good if you are really good at creating graphics, or if you want to hire someone who can create a graphic for you for like $5 on Fiverr. Super simple. Just have them create something with your logo that targets multifamily, obviously. Throw maybe a little catchphrase there, and then just give them your contact information. You'll have wholesalers reach out to you. Typically, right, wholesalers will reach out to you with some deals. You might even have some folks that are interested in getting started that you can, I wouldn't say coach per se, but you can kind of coach them into what you're looking for in certain markets. And then, you can definitely leverage that. Building relationships on social media is huge. So if you are involved in any of the groups, right, the multifamily groups, given a certain location, you can build some relationships there with other investors that are in that area already. And you can, either pseudo partner on certain deals, or you can just kind of trade information and you can get some good deals there. But I'll say one of the best ways that I found deals is going through the property manager. 100% property managers are your boots on ground experts in the field, in the market. They know everything that's going on there, or they should know, right? Any good property manager, you can ask them if they invest themselves, or if they were to invest. If they don't, where would they invest and why? Right? Let them talk about it. And some the really good ones, they'll just go off. They'll tell you, hey, I like this for this reason because of X, Y, Z, right? And if you build a good relationship with them, not just one day, not just the 1 week, right? I mean, it's going to be a constant thing. But just let them know you're looking to partner and you're looking to stay with them long term while you're in that market. And you'll be surprised what you get back from them, because a lot of these property managers are partnered with these mom and pop owners. And a lot of these mom and pop owners now are getting in their 70s, their 80s, and they're looking to sell, right? They don't want to continue to manage these things forever. And they don't necessarily always have children to pass their deals down to. So property managers are definitely the best ones, I'll say. And that's kind of, I'll stop there and let anyone else chime in.
That's huge. Vince, could I jump on this one?
Yes.
So just kind of to piggyback off of some of the stuff that Mike said, is building relationships. So another thing that we'll do is broker relationships. You can hop on LoopNet, not necessarily to find the deal that you're looking for, although you can find deals that way, but see who has all the listings. So for us, once you've chosen a market, for example, El Paso, like Grace Steel has a lot of listings. I already forgot their name.
Team Wanaribe.
Yeah, Team Wanaribe. Their name is on like every corner. So once you find these people that have all the listings, they might not have a property on LoopNet because it's already been picked up off market. But start reaching out to those guys and calling them. And the other thing that Mike said is kind of coaching them into what you're wanting. At first, they're going to send you crap deals, right? And so you want to provide feedback instead of just like, oh, this one's not for me, pass. Shoot them an email back and say, hey, thanks for thinking of us. Here's what we liked about the property. Here's what we didn't like about the property. Or as you're coming across your research of property that they just sold. Hey, this is kind of how we would have underwrote that deal that you just did. And here's kind of the number that we came up to on that. And let them know that you are looking at what they're sending and that you know what you're talking about whenever you kind of give that feedback. and kind of call their bluff, right? Because they're going to test you with some deals that maybe they're just trying to push off to you. And if you show them that you're serious, you'll start getting some of those better deals. And then, you know, that you have the ability to close.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I was at to plug ADPI. I was at a Rod Khleif event in Orlando or LA.
Los Angeles.
Yep. And we met Eric Upchurch out there, and he was talking about this social media thing that they did where they're using skip tracers, which are common in real estate. The people that specialize in finding who owns the property and what their addresses are, phone numbers, and that's how you normally build your lists that you can then, you know, cold call them, direct mail them. Like they went one step further of like finding email addresses and like Facebooking them, and then hired like VAs to sit there and like Facebook and social media and DM them to ask
Targeted ads.
What is it? Oh yeah, targeted ads. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So that was something I've never
Yeah.
heard. Like we've done the skip tracing thing. We've done right now I have 2 VAs, virtual assistants that I just hired specifically for skip tracing and cold calling that are going to run down through our list. But I had never heard of like finding these people on social media and do targeted ads to you know, solicit if they want to sell or not. So I thought that was pretty smart. But
Can I hop in
relationships?
Can I hop in real quick on what you just said, Vince? Because it's gangster, and I think a lot of people will hear it and they say, "Oh, that sounds great, but how do I do it?" Right? The easiest way, guys, is to go in through LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn profile, and if you don't, you need to get on LinkedIn, guys, because that is where 90% of your partners, your capital, right, your managers, whatever, right, are. So you want to go there. LinkedIn always has your email address and it's able for people to access. So if you want to do it, or if you want to hire a VA to do it, have them scrub your entire contacts, or people who have followed you, who you're following, grab their emails, and you can use those emails into Facebook and create targeted ads for those emails. So if you have friends, if you have family, right, your contacts, if you're, you know, doing any kind of business here and you have a following, use those following and create specific targeted ads for those individuals for anything from finding properties to raising capital to whatever the heck it is. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And you can probably do that overnight, which is really cool. So just want to throw that in there as kind of like a how-to.
That's awesome. That's a pro tip right there.
Yeah, pro tip. Ninja trick. I'm coining that ninja trick.
Laren has his hand raised.
Laren's got a question.
Oh, I kind of just want to chime in on the broker relationship aspect of it. So in terms of when you're trying to establish these broker relationships, I know with Jake and Gino we have like a credibility book, but from the broker side, it's really important to from the get-go establish yourself as someone who's a serious buyer, because when you're marketing your properties through LoopNet, Facebook, and whatnot, there are a lot of window shoppers that you'll get, and if a broker senses that you're a window shopper and they're just going to waste time or a tire kicker, they're just not going to answer your calls, not going to answer your email. So you just want to establish it right away that you're serious and that you're going to close and that you can follow through on what you say you're going to do.
Yep.
And if you're new and you don't have personal credibility, meaning you've never closed a multifamily deal before, that's exactly what Laren's talking about. They're going to ask you, what other deals have you done? And then show me proof of funds. And if you can't answer either of those questions, they're not going to call you back. So if that's you, you need to partner with somebody to where you can leverage their credibility. So if you're the new guy, partner with somebody that maybe has done a multifamily deal before, or that has the bankroll to show a proof of funds. Because they're going to want to see, if you're looking at $1 million deal, you're going to need to show them some kind of bank account that has, $300,000-400K in it. Because if you don't have that, then they're going to be like, this clown doesn't even have the money to close a deal or to even write an offer. Why am I even giving the time of day?
It's show me the money, then show me the money.
Yeah. So you need to have the down payment or the proof of funds, and you need to have the credibility. And if you don't have it, the easiest way to do is just partner with somebody that has it, leverage theirs.
So we've got another question from Kathleen.
So for skip tracing, my target area where I'm looking for another house, it's all old people. They probably don't have Facebook. They probably don't have email. The closest I can find right now, I mean, other than hiring a skip tracer, is just whatever's available in the tax records. And that's not the most reliable. Are there any other techniques or areas I should
drive for dollars? Is that what you're talking? Just drive for dollars, or you're trying to find like out of state people, like owners?
Oh, sorry. I've been doing it in my neighborhood. Sorry.
What?
In your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Yeah, stick a flyer on their door that says, interested in your property, call me.
These houses are vacant?
Oh, so yeah, you
Talk to the neighbors. I've actually had good experience in that when I was in Texas. Talk to the neighbors, because a lot of times if the house is vacant, you start getting, issues with the house itself. And people don't want squatters, people don't want, bad stuff happening at the property itself. So, they're usually like, hey, you know what, I'm trying to get this property taken care of next door. I saw that it's kind of vacant. Do you know where the owners are at? And, I'll go talk to the one across the street. Oh yeah, that's, Bill and Linda, they moved down to Florida, but yeah, I got their contact information. I can give you the number of,
Okay, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
It really helps when you have a.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You'll get a door knock answered. I would have a harder time getting a door knock answered. So.
Kathleen, you said that the tax records were inaccurate. What do you mean by that?
The tax records are reflecting the address of the physical place, but oftentimes it's, for us in Hawaii, it's to a what do they call it when they set up an estate?
Trust
Or an LLC.
Yeah.
So you can usually go on, even a trust typically has to be set up through the state the same way an LLC would be. So have you tried going to, this may be different in Hawaii, but where I work in Missouri, trusts still have to be registered with the state. So you can still go to the Secretary of State's website and look up the point of contact for a trust. You might want to try that.
Yes, I've actually been looking up the documents
Okay.
when it's transferred over to the trust. We
Yeah.
have a slightly different system, but
Yeah.
I'm still running into the problem where a lot of the trusts are still referencing the property, which I know is vacant.
I had Kathleen, if you use a truth finder site where they kind of has the person's background, and it'll tell you the relatives and all the relatives' addresses. So I've had success sending letters to and you can kind of just you do your own sleuthing, say, oh, they have a brother or sister in this age or whatever, and that address, and they live, and you can kind of see their history. And so a site like Truth Finder, or these other kind of lookup sites, you can kind of figure out and kind of find a path for who would be the closest relative, or where they moved to, or the previous address, or maybe even where they are now. So that's another way to kind of just sleuth your way to find out where the current address is.
Okay.
Yeah, Kathleen, it sounds like there's some people in here that you can connect with that's got some good input for you.
Yeah, definitely. And then don't discount the skip tracers on Upwork. That's usually because skip trace, it's not necessarily hard work, but it's just time consuming. So when you factor in the time value of your time, you can probably hire some guy in India to do this for $7 an hour, and in 2-3 hours they'll give you a fairly good list. I just did it for El Paso, and I paid $15, and I had 31 apartment complexes traced back to true owners. And I got their phone number, physical address, and email for $15. So there's definitely sites out there where you can do it. I just hire that stuff out. But again, if the tax records are wrong, that's usually where they all start. They usually start at tax records and then kind of branch off from there. So, but yeah, I was really surprised because with apartments, they're all owned in LLCs. So he had to have some level of sophistication in software to get past the LLCs at the state level, whatever state they're formed in, and he had no problem getting through that. looking, getting through even the states where they're having like Nevada and whatever. So $15, and I got a list back 2 hours later. So give that a shot too.
What you got next?
All right, good questions. Well, okay, so getting back to some of the questions for the panel, and then we've got some other resources there in the chat too, so you guys can check on those ones too. Yeah, so for somebody who's not in the military, and obviously speaking to you guys who are active duty or prior service, what are the biggest challenges that you guys have seen in investing, while being in the military?
So for me, it's been the completely unpredictable schedule. I could say, hey, we're gonna do this call with this property owner or this investor at this time. My schedule's open, and 30 minutes before that call, I get pulled away to do something. So that for me has just been kind of the most difficult option is trying to forecast any kind of calendar and then stick to it.
Cool. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I would say I'd say definitely the time and scheduling is probably one of the bigger challenges. Another big challenge that I had while I was active duty was just being on the ship. Right, ship life it's kind of terrible because when you're out at sea, there's very little. I guess there's very a restricted way that you can communicate with people. Email, obviously, right, is the best. If you have the opportunity to use what's called the POTS line, right, which is like the one line that we can, call out onto the mainland, even then you have to keep your call short, very brief, and there's only so much you can talk about. And there's no way you can kind of schedule a meeting. You just have to like give an approximate time to make that happen. And then, of course, in the event there's some kind of exercise going on where comms have to be shut off for a day or two or a week, then you're just kind of in the dark that entire time. So one of the most challenging things is if you're doing management yourself and you're active duty, that it's tough, right? And I'd say one of the best ways to overcome that is just to, really build a strong team. Whether it's, a friend that you have that's back on the shore that's able to help you out, or if it's actually finding a really good property manager. Again, going back to that property manager being your boots on ground expert, I highly, highly recommend good property managers, man. They can be your saving grace.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, that's some good advice there. So for somebody who's looking to get started, that people don't have any experience, what kind of advice could you guys give to get started? And it's a good one with the next question there is, when's the best time to get started?
Yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday. Ben said it right. I firmly believe that time in the market is more important than timing the market. You can't time it. I mean, you can try, right? I'm sure everyone was waiting for this like market to crash, and then, COVID happened like randomly, right when people weren't expecting it. And now, even with COVID, we've seen a lot of fluctuations, right? Because everyone thinks there's like one solid direction where the market's going. And it's like, no, not really. Rates are getting better right now, right? You're starting to see the economy pick up again. Doesn't mean it can't crash, tomorrow or the next day, right? Or when that re-election comes, who knows? But there's just a lot of uncertainty in the markets, period. So it's better you just get started, because no deal is a bad deal if you get it for the right price. Remember that.
Well, dropping quotes on us.
Quotes, yeah.
Yeah. So the best time to say so. And it's just funny because all the people that were sitting, like what Mike was saying, all the people that are sitting on the sidelines saying, the market's too hot. I'm going to wait for the next correction, the next, downturn. You know what? We're here, and they're still not going to buy deals. So then they got to come up with a new excuse of why they're not buying deals now. Like, there's too much uncertainty. I don't know what the next 6 to 12 months looks like, whatever.
I could make so much money in the stock market right now.
Yeah, right. So
I got a question for the group.
Yeah.
I was going to say, someone was saying, time in the market, that's what matters. I would argue that we don't really know the effects of what COVID would present from the economy standpoint. And so, sometimes maybe spending $100K in a down payment today, if you wait a couple of months and see what happens, that $100,000 may yield 2 properties instead of 1. I think that's something to be said, especially for new beginners. I think the margin for error in the beginning is a lot less than when you have a couple properties under your belt. You know had the experience of managing the projects and having budget overruns, etc. I mean, so my thoughts is that I would say for newbies or beginners that you should pay attention to making sure you make the right decision on the right property than to just jump the gun, jump in. And I know all the things you use, mitigation, etc. I just think that you got to be very careful and like analyze the market locally where you're at. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't
I
disagree with you,
agree.
Kyle.
Yeah, about running the numbers.
Yeah, so I guess my counter argument would be is, for example, we just closed this El Paso deal April 15th, like right in the middle of, is everyone going to pay rent April 1st? We don't know. And so kind of based on that, we were able to go back and renegotiate, an added risk, and we got an additional $70,000 seller credit because we didn't know. 88,000.
Yeah, plus all of April's rents.
Oh, yeah. So that's right. So $70,000 credit plus all of April's rents because we didn't know. And it turns out like people still paid their rent. So it actually worked out really good for us.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I certainly don't want to seem like as if, especially what you guys are doing. Steve told me a little bit of what you guys are doing. But I'd argue that when you talk about beginners, when you're I think he used the term differently, grouping together. I kind of use the term loosely, syndication. Like group of you guys got together, which means you reduce the risk or exposure in terms of financial losses by doing that. When I look at it as like a beginner, I'm talking like if I'm one-on-one mentoring someone and I said, hey, you should get in the market, do your research, and you're going it alone, so to speak. There's a lot more risk that's involved. I'm fortunate. My partner is my wife, but not everybody has that option. So that's what I mean by in terms of being cautious. Now, if there's a group of us going together, I think right now, I mean, anytime, in fact, you can go out and search for the best deals and you jump into it. But that's kind of what I was alluding to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you bring up some really valid points, Kyle. It's not to say that you want to be reckless with your decision, right? But it's that you want to make sure that you're educated, right? And you touch on a great piece there. Whether you're working as a team or whether you're building a team on your own, right? A team of professionals to help you out. You want to network yourself with the people who are doing it or people who are experienced and can help you out. But I guess my point there is that you don't want to over analyze and think that you have to make all the right decisions, because you are going to make mistakes. Whether you're a professional or you're a beginner, you're going to make mistakes at some point, and those mistakes are going to cost you money. But here's the thing is that are you letting your fear hold you back, or are you letting your education and your network hold you back, right? Or what is really holding you back from getting in that market? Because if it's fear that's holding you back and you're educated enough, you're connected enough to get started, you should get started. Just do it, right? I mean, you want to be smart, don't do something that's reckless, but if you understand, then that's it. Yeah.
I love that. And I like have to step in and say like, it's fear, but it's also like fear of, can I weather the storm that's coming? Because it's going to happen. Like you're going to have an eviction or a horrible, end of lease situation or a rehab that goes over. Like it's inevitable. That is part of what you take on when you take on these kinds of projects. And it's this fear of, can I weather that storm? Of when that happens, am I going to melt, or am I going to be like, all right, this is what I got. Like I knew I was coming into this and I'm going to handle it.
Yeah. And then like when we were talking about back to my slideshow that never ended, going into underwriting, when you put that devil's advocate hat on, that's your opportunity to go through and figure out everything that could possibly go wrong. For example, our 48 unit deal, we underwrote that deal, I think at 20% vacancy year, or maybe 15% vacancy year one, and then stepping that down over time based off of pre-March numbers. Once March hit, we were like, oh shit, we immediately got on the phone with our advisors and our mentors. Like I didn't do this in a vacuum. Got on my advisors, got on my mentors, really asked a bunch of questions from a bunch of different angles, see what really smart people are doing, way smarter than me. And we looked at, okay, this guy has 4,000 units. Here how he's advising to underwrite during these conditions. This guy has 1,000 units, like very credible people. And we kind of create an average of a risk analysis model that we applied to that 48 units. So we went from like 50% vacancy to like, what was it, Duke? Like 30% or 60% or what, something like that? 50% for the first 3 months?
Yeah.
So 50% for the first 6 months is what we modeled to, and the deal still stood up. We took our P&I reserves and put it out from 3 months, which was lender requirements, up to 14 months of pity, meaning we could, to Victoria's point, weather the storm. With that deal, we could get $0 in income for 14 months and be fully operational on every front. That's how much reserves we have right now at closing, because we went back, counseled with very smart people, asked them our questions. What are you doing? What would you do in this situation? Here's the property. Here's the risk profile as we wrote the property. What are you seeing in the market? And we asked that to the, again, very smart people, thousands of units, and they kind of gave us their pitch on what to think, and we averaged it out, and we went back to our underwriting. The deal still stood up. We ended up needing a considerable credit. Like I said, we almost got 90 grand, a little under 90 grand credit at closing, but we knew that we needed that to close the deal, and we were okay to walk away if we didn't get that. And that was the thing, is you have to be okay to walk away. And we were 100%, we voted inside the GP on that deal, saying that we're going to walk away if we can't reach this agreement. And they ended up, helping us out, giving us the credit, which made the deal work. And then, turns out everybody paid the rent anyway. So it was pretty awesome. But yeah, again, what Mike was saying, education is important. Get started now, get educated. Don't just go into the, start shooting and then aim later. Definitely educate yourself now, but now is the time to take action, cautiously, right? Get mentors, get advisors. And that's what we did, right? I got, a lot of deals under my belt till now, and I still take counsel with people that are way smarter than me, and I have no problem doing that. And I'll do it on the next deal too.
Hey, can I touch on that real quick too? Just for somebody who is a newbie at this, I got to say that what you're talking about with getting a mentor and just and having somebody to talk to about any deals that you're looking at when you're new to this is very important. I know it was for me. As a matter of fact, Kyle helped me out big time. My wife and I went over to his place, sat down with him and his wife, had some lunch, and we showed him a couple of deals that we were interested in doing, running the numbers, just getting like a second opinion, like, hey, what do you think? And they look good. So we pulled the trigger on one of them, locked it in. But I think having that, for me, having that second opinion of someone else who's experienced and have done this a bunch of times was really helpful. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah,
and I just want to say thank you to Kyle, and then especially to all of you guys here, because the information you put out and stuff like this is very helpful to someone like me and to a multitude of other people who are just getting started.
Awesome. Cool.
Great to hear.
Thank you. What else we got?
So
one or two more. I don't know. Anybody else got any questions? Because we go down this list here. Anybody interested in VA loan stuff? That's the next 3 questions. How to house hack your VA? Mike will be all over that.
Yeah, we in fact not to I know Mike, you're saying can be all over that. We just did it here in Hawaii, big market. In fact, Steve did the inspection for our house. We concluded the 4-unit building.
Nice.
Initially at a higher price point, and it worked out pretty well for us. As it relates to that. So I suppose we can offer some experience on that as well.
You said it was a 4-unit?
Yeah, it's a 4-unit. Yeah.
Nice.
Where at?
That's awesome.
In Kaneohe.
Okay.
Damn.
Nice,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Definitely
You know
a
what?
higher
Let's-
price
Huge,
point.
How
huge
did you-
house, huge
How'd you
place.
find that place? Let's start there. How did you find a 4-unit in Kaneohe?
Yeah, so essentially, I know some of the traditional sources. In fact, my wife and I, Angela, is the one who normally is hunting. I mean, this is what she does in terms of what the obsession is with it, and so a lot of the Zillow, a lot of the the traditional means of finding it. But in particular, this one here, we kind of ran down the list too of all the top 4 that we had. But our realtor, who we worked with, he actually he bumped up price range. I mean, we were looking at something more conservatively around 1 million, preferably less than that. And we ended up not finding anything until we got to the price point around 1.6 million. And he found it for us, and we were very fortunate. In fact, I think we're pretty lucky where it's at. It's actually it's working out really, really well. Put it that way. We're here in Hawaii and not having to spend money in BAH on housing in Hawaii, in Kaneohe, using your VA loan, 0 money down, 1% back at the close.
Bro.
And that's a nice, and they got a nice house too. That's a sweet house.
Yeah,
Outstanding.
Yeah,
That's
I've
impressive.
been there too. Brought over some bananas that I grew in my backyard. It's a sweet digs they got.
That's impressive.
Nice.
That's
Yeah,
some
in
nice.
fact, we
And
just
I
got
wore a
done,
face mask.
just got done doing overhauling, rather doing about a $50,000 value add to it, just to make it essentially maintenance free and a setup for as a rental in the outset while we leave Hawaii onto the next duty station. So it worked out really well. So
Nice.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Looks like
Incredible.
Caffeine.
yeah, looks like Kathleen's got a question.
Hey, did any of you guys have to fill out a financial disclosure form since you're investing with LLCs and as GPs
Fill it out for who?
for the government?
Oh, no.
You don't have to. Oh.
No.
Nope, we're
Go
good.
find out.
Yeah.
All right, how about you? 14.
So the only time that I've had to do that was for totally different purposes, for like part of my commissioning packet, for a couple of reasons. One, to make sure that I was responsible enough with my own money, and 2, that I didn't have some huge amount of debt for my clearances, to make sure I wasn't susceptible. Yeah. If you have a huge amount of debt, you're more susceptible to,
Blackmail.
yeah, exactly, blackmail or taking
only
money
way
for
to do that.
secrets.
I have to fill out a financial disclosure form every year listing all of my investments.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Sounds like you need a new job.
That depends on the job with the government. When I did acquisitions back at NavAir, I was involved in contracts and I had to do that. But I haven't had to do that recently. The only thing with security clearance and a lot of stuff, whether you're investing overseas or not, but that may have to do with your specific job.
Yeah, that makes sense if you're in acquisitions, making sure you're not, taking kickbacks or choosing one contract over another. But I definitely don't have to do that.
I think everyone over a GS 13 has to fill one out, at least in my agency.
was that
Above my
sorry?
pay grade.
Was that Scott their last take?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my wife was saying that she only had to do that financial disclosure when she was in very specific positions, i.e. the last position was the XO, et cetera. And so,
Okay.
but that's the only time, and she'll have to do it again coming soon. But other than that, should be. I don't know your job.
My question was whether or not you listed your investments in the financial disclosure if you're an LP, for example. So I'm gonna have to do that next year.
Did you list investments when you did? Yeah, she said she did. Yeah.
Okay.
So one kind of similar related thing of disclosing for military audience here is that I'm kind of asking without really wanting to get too far into it would be especially if you're partnering and you partner with somebody that is not a U.S. citizen. how does that affect your military clearance and stuff like that, or how much of that do you have to disclose? I think I talked with Mike about this a little bit, and I don't know if anybody has any.
It's better to disclose all of it. I legitimately just had my interview last week, and if there's any questions that come up, they will dig into why you left it off. They even dug into an exchange student that I had 30 years ago on why I didn't put that in there. But if you have any kind of business connection, investments, or anything overseas, it's better to go into as much detail as possible.
Yeah.
Because if they find out that you left anything out, even if it was innocent, left it out, then they're going to dig into it quite a bit and have to answer why it was left out.
Yeah, so I guess it'd be wouldn't be during your re-up, but it would be more like, say, like I just did mine maybe 3 years ago, but now I'm doing an investment now. Do I notify, my security officer now, or do I just wait till my next what do they call it? Inspection, investigation, and
Next
then
investigation.
So
do it now, because I was the security manager at one point, and disclosing it straight up front as soon as you start working on a deal or with a foreign contact, that they're aware of it from the beginning, because when you do come for your renewal, if you're like, oh hey, I did that deal 2 years ago and they've been in contact for 2 years, you can say, well, why didn't you disclose this sooner? So that could become an issue.
Yeah, technically the generic definition is any change of status. So you could read as deep into that as you want, but it's always better to err on the side of caution. And your security manager may not even care, but at least you added them to documentation.
Yeah, there's a memo in a file somewhere that I let them know. I was just wondering.
It's like 2 buttons. I remember when we disclosed for our investment in Dubai, they literally checked 2 boxes in front of me and then submit it. And I was like, all right, cool. That's it.
Nice.
I was like, that's it? That's it. All right, cool.
Nice. Cool. What else we got? We got some questions on out-of-state. I think Kyle, anybody wants to ask more of the VA house hack, he's probably the best person on this call. The one I did was like 4 years ago, so probably not relevant data, but and some out-of-state stuff or scaling from maybe a VA. Most people start with a VA house hack, make some money, and then want to roll it into something else like multifamily. That's what I did. Anybody want to get into any of that, or you just want to roll on to the next topic? We're here as long as you want. Okay, then.
I guess so. Here, I'll toss in something here quick, just so we can cover it. Getting started via house hacking, guys, is definitely one of the best ways to do it. It's on a conservative approach to scaling at a very, very quick pace, right? Depending on how you do it, right? I'll give an example. Let's say you are in, I'll give my example, right? Let's say you're in North Virginia and you find yourself a duplex or maybe even a single family situation, and you decide you want to do short-term rentals, right? Short-term rentals is a great way to build a lot of capital very, very quickly. Now, of course, you want to understand market and how that affects. For short-term rentals right now may not be as strong as they were before. However, they also might in certain areas, and it just kind of depends, because a lot of people are a lot less willing to travel into larger establishments, such as hotels that are close quarters and have a lot of people traveling through, where they might be more amicable to staying at, say, a private residence that's theirs, that they know that they can kind of control the space a little bit more, right? But it just depends, right, on who your customer is. If your clients are coming for certain events, if those events are canceled, they're not going to come. If they're coming to relax on the beach and your place on the beach, right, then they'll come. So you just have to get to know your market and how you house hack. If you're doing short-term rentals, if you're renting out extra rooms, or if you're renting out, an entire unit, let's say, like the fourplex that Kyle has, right? Just got to figure out how you're doing it. But the best way to make sure that you can scale is to build systems around what you're doing. You have to implement systems into it, right? From a system to how you're finding your renters, how you're finding your tenants, how you're dealing with problems, to even how you're managing your money. and think about what you're going to do on the back end of it. If you're going to scale into multifamily, you know, two things. You have to have liquidity, right? And you have to have some education. So maybe some of the things that you want to do is start saving the money that you're building, or if you're pocketing BAH, save that money, pay off some of your debt, right? And get yourself a strong foundation where you have a good pocket of cash to use as disposable income, right? As like your earnest money deposits, right? That type of stuff. And then also save up a certain amount of money that you can use to invest in your training, in your mentorship, right? In building your network, going to events, things that you can do to help get you to operating at, you know, the level that you want to be at. And don't feel afraid to be conservative with this approach. You can do one house hack and wait, you know, 1 year, 2 years to save up a certain amount of capital to go in and buy training, you know, find mentorship and have money to do your first deal. And your first deal could be 100 units. Whereas maybe if you had, you know, decided you just wanted to go all in, right? You weren't really that educated and you decided to pick up 2 or 3 or 4 units along the way at smaller deals. I mean, you have to figure out what it is you want to do and be very, very focused and be strategic as you scale up, right? That's kind of, you know, some good nuggets of wisdom to keep in mind as you're going.
Yeah, I think getting specific on your goals and kind of your strategy is pretty important. I know early on I got kind of that shiny object syndrome where, you know, I should do flips to get capital, and then I can house hack, and I can, you know, I can do this and I can do that, and it just doesn't work. Getting real specific on those goals and getting educated, I think is pretty important.
Cool.
Good. Yeah, great advice, guys. Any other questions? You guys want to?
Wrapping this up.
Yeah, I want to give away some stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got one question.
What was that?
I was just wondering how you guys are gonna, with the whole COVID-19 pandemic, especially with one proposal in the Senate about the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act. How are you guys planning for it?
Oh, sorry. Larry, did you just fall asleep? I just watched his phone.
I was charging my phone, so I just switched from my my laptop over to because my laptop was being super slow over to my phone.
It's okay.
I
just saw you like passed out. All right, so how we're planning on that? Are you talking about the
There's a handful of bills that are in.
Man, the one I read was just
junk. Yeah, it was horrible.
My God, it was so bad. So back to what we were saying before of going into this, you know, cautiously and making sure in our underwriting we prepare for the worst. So we have enough liquidity now to last a pretty long time. You know, even if we go down to 50% occupancy, we can last, you know, like a year, or was it 2 years, 24 months, 28 months with, you know, only half the people paying. So being really conservative on your numbers, make sure you're buying right, getting good financing in place to where your debt service is low. If you can negotiate an IO period, then do that. So that's one thing we're doing. Other things, you know, if we get to a point where we got to push off CapEx down the road and kind of go to like a skeleton OpEx thing where like, hey, we're only going to do like emergency stuff. And we had to do that for the last month just because our contractors like physically couldn't work. So we just said, hey, emergency tickets only. And, you know, the second order effect of that was our OpEx for the last month was like nothing. So because we didn't have any, you know, repair bills to pay. So it's one thing we're doing. If they, you know, there's a lot of bills going on with the rent cancellation and all that stuff and the landlord. With the couple that I've read, and I haven't seen a good one yet, they're all optional. So it's up to the landlord to opt in to that relief.
Right.
So if they opt in, they want to buy into that relief package, you know, they're married to the government for X amount of years. And you know, you're going to
5 years.
What is it? 5 years? Yeah. And you're getting rent
5 years. You can't do
can't raise
rent increases.
Yeah. You have rent control. And I've seen ones where like the landlord's responsible for like providing services for education and job placement and healthcare. And like, all this stuff. I'm like, what is this? Like, did we, like, why is a landlord responsible for providing these things?
I just have two comments. One, if you take any kind of government bailout or anything like that, just think about how you're going to be viewed next time you go to a lender and you're trying to get a loan on your next property. Like, you just requested forbearance on your last property or whatever. Like, why do we think that you could pay this mortgage? And then two, the short answer is we're still buying properties.
The opportunity in it is, in things like this, we're on the lookout for operators that weren't prepared for this. Their underwriting wasn't sound. They didn't have the liquidity to weather a storm like this. And maybe we can come in and buy that property, at a significant discount. So we're looking for deals, and obviously, going cautiously, underwrite very, very conservatively for the first 24 months. But yeah, we're still looking for deals. The mom and pop operators that just don't have the systems in place, like what Mike was talking about, don't have the level of sophistication, don't have the liquidity or reserves to weather a storm. So
I also would love to hop in and just add, and operators that don't have the focus on relationship building that a lot of operators here do, in terms of, if you get into a spot where it's getting tight, you have a choice to make as an operator. How are you going to approach that problem? Are you going to create incentives for people to pay early, or are you going to threaten eviction? And which one do you think is going to get the better return in terms of cash in your pocket to pay that mortgage this month? And an adept and sophisticated investor at any level, whether you're 1 unit or 100 units, is going to choose building relationships to get that money versus threats and anger to get that money. And that all plays into the whole long term, are you going to be able to survive this because you, one, have underwritten properly and have safe returns, you have your reserves that you need to weather the storm, and as you're going through the storm, you're capable of professionally managing those relationships and maintaining positive ones.
All right.
So the best thing we've done is raffles.
Yeah.
So we did a raffle. We kicked it out to all of our tenants. Say, hey, if you pay your rent on time, you will be entered into this raffle. And at whatever the end of the grace period was, the 3rd, the 5th, whatever we decided, the 10th, whatever that date the property manager decided. They put all the names of people that paid their rent in a hat, pick out 2 or 3 names, and those people get $50 gift cards for food gift cards or whatever. And for our tenants, the majority of them are labor force, C-class properties are the people that for the majority of this pandemic are the ones that are laid off. The people that, not cashiers, like waitresses and stuff like that. So about half of our residents have been impacted in some way. So, they got their checks, the stimulus checks, they got the unemployment, which is helping out. They're paying the rent, but we're incentivizing them also. But with that good relationship building that Matt was in charge of doing the raffle for tenants.
And so that's also part of training your residents, right? So I think we're doing, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about doing a raffle for one, paying on time, and then a second raffle for switching to the online payment program to make it kind of easier on the property manager. And then we do things like, the block party, 4th of July, holidays, pass out. I think for our property in Michigan, Christmas, we passed out like door hangers with little goodies in it. Major holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, pass out turkeys and some stuff like that. And, any of our, I don't know what you call it, publications, anything that goes out, it's not an apartment complex, it's a community. You're not a tenant, you're a resident. And really, like Victoria says, building those relationships, because when it comes down like, oh, do I want to, go buy a new car? Do I want to pay my rent this month? Well, that time I was hurt and the property manager helped me out or made me feel welcome, or that's my community. That's where I live. I'm going to pay my rent this month.
Nice.
Cool. All
Quick
right.
question.
Oh.
Hit us, Alex.
This is Alex. So for investing as a LP, so how does the tax benefits work, or is there any?
Yes. So it'll be, well, I don't want to say yes. It's up to how that structure is on that deal. Every structure is going to be different. The GP, the managers can cut that deal up however they want. Normally, the tax benefits will flow through to the LPs. That's the most often strategy that we see nowadays. So say for us, we're going to do a cost segregation study with 100% bonus depreciation on everything that's 15 years or less. So we're expecting a pretty significant tax write-off year one of this property. And what we are going to do is that will get filtered down through the LPs into the holding LLC, down through the LPs, pro rata based off of the share you own of that LLC in the form of a K1, and then you go file that. So if you own 10% of the deal, you'll get 10% of that depreciation from that property of that year. So other LP structures are going to be, it might be where the GP holds all of the depreciation. And that's just something, that's a question you need to ask, because it's one of those things that they can kind of slice it up however they want. Normally it's flow through. Our advisors told us it's more complicated to do it any other way. Just everybody gets an even cut based off of the share they own of that property. Because you can get into some gray areas of pandering to hire people that need it more than you. So if somebody needs a tax shelter more than you because they're a high income earner, and you give them a bigger cut, now you're running into a gray area for the SEC. So best thing to do is just even cut, and that's what most people do.
I can comment on it as a LP. I'm an LP in 3 deals, and in the year one, of late, it's been a pretty large loss in year one, paper loss, that you can then use to offset any other passive income, unless you qualify as a real estate professional, in which case you can then offset active income. But kind of for everybody, no matter what, the passive losses can be used against passive gain and portfolio income, so capital gain. So typically
this year, you can carry it back, net operating losses to prior years. So with the CARES Act. So I'm amending my 2018 taxes to carry a 2019 loss back to 2018 and getting cash back from the past.
That's nice.
Hell yeah.
Returned.
It's
so
Trump.
the idea is the time value of money thing, right? It's like you get to use your money, faster than any other vehicle that I know of. It's just the timing of that loss, right? It's that you have a huge loss, then you can use it to offset your gains, and so you're never paying any taxes on the actual income. And then at the exit there's a gain, but then you have the losses to offset most of it. So you end up paying a small amount of tax overall for the whole life of the investment. So it is one of the most tax advantaged vehicles out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, that's kind of like what I'm really interested in, is how do I maximize the tax benefits of such the multifamily deals. And
and that's something you're not getting with a duplex. Like, you're not doing a cost seg bonus depreciation on like a residential. Like usually the cost to do it is prohibitive of paying for that expense. Yeah. It's like $4 or $5 grand. So
yeah, we just recorded a podcast the other day, which hasn't dropped yet, but right around the $1 million price point is kind of what you'll start looking at doing it.
Costing, yeah.
Yeah, so if like Kyle and Angela, I don't know if they did it, like I said, they would have, I don't know, what do they say, $1.6 million? Yeah. I would guess probably $400,000 in paper losses this year on their taxes, on their 2020 taxes. They did a cost seg. And that's just got like paper write-off, like just gone. Like that income just completely
didn't happen. Yep.
But again, this is for entertainment purposes,
Yeah.
right? Always consult with your tax
Oh
professional.
yeah,
Got to put that disclaimer out.
My man.
Yeah, we are not CPAs.